The young and the restless spoilers. The invitation arrived in a white linen envelope, thick, textured, elegant. Its gold-embossed lettering bore no company logo, no recognizable insignia, only a symbol, a quill crossed over a key, sealed beneath wax that carried the faint scent of amber and sea salt. The name on the card read simply, Aristotle Dumas requests your presence at his summer estate in Nice. For many in Genoa City, it was a curiosity. For a few, a mystery. But for Lily Winters, it was something else entirely. It was a summons that rattled her to the bone, not because of who had sent it, but because she knew the sender wasn't real. At least, he wasn't supposed to be. For months, the name Aristotle Dumas had hovered like a phantom over business deals, scandalous rumors, and power plays that even the Newmans couldn't predict. He had become a figure of myth. Linked to tech acquisitions, media disruptions, offshore holdings, and whispered promises of revenge disguised as disruption. Genoa City's elite had taken to either fearing or admiring him, depending on their position on the chessboard. But Lily had always suspected that beneath the smoke and mirrors was something familiar. Something deeply personal. Now, the truth was undeniable. Cain Ashby, her ex-husband, the father of her children, the man who had broken her heart and vanished from her life without warning, had returned not as a repentant figure seeking closure, but as the architect of a lie so elaborate it touched every corner of her world. He was Aristotle Dumas. And his game was far from over. The revelation came not through confession, but confrontation. When Amanda Sinclair, ever the voice of logic and legal insight, brought Lily the proof. A signature pattern matched on confidential European trade documents, an old digital alias resurrected from Cain's previous escapades, and a shared IP address from a villa in Nice, Lily felt the floor beneath her tremble. She wanted to deny it. She wanted it to be another twist in a long line of manipulations. But as Amanda gently placed the evidence on her desk and said, "It's him, Lily. It's always been him," all Lily could do was stare out the window at the city that now seemed foreign. And then came the second wave of shock, the party. Dumas's exclusive summer celebration at his private estate in Nice wasn't just a luxurious gathering of elites, it was a declaration. He had invited several key players from Genoa City, including Billy, Devon, Jill, Amanda, and yes, Lily. The guest list wasn't just curated, it was a power move. Every invitee had, in some way, been touched by Dumas's actions or Cain's history. And now, he wanted them all in one place. Lily's instincts screamed against attending. But her heart and her rage demanded she go. She needed answers. She needed closure. She needed to look into Cain's eyes and ask the question that had haunted her for years, why? When she arrived at the Dumas estate, it felt less like a party and more like a theatrical production. The estate in Nice was breathtaking, perched atop a cliff, draped in ivy, with terraces that spilled into the ocean breeze. Classical music floated from unseen speakers, and waiters in white gloves offered champagne flutes filled with rare vintages. Guests mingled with fascination and tension, all waiting for the man of the hour to emerge. But Lily wasn't there for spectacle. She was there for truth. As the sun dipped beneath the Mediterranean horizon, casting the estate in molten gold, the crowd began to quiet. A private string quartet slowed its tempo. Then, from the marble staircase at the center of the estate, he appeared. Cain Ashby. Not in the rugged charm she once knew, but refined, styled, and exuding the persona of Aristotle Dumas like it was a second skin. He wore a tailored suit in midnight blue, his once boyish grin now replaced with the kind of calculated confidence only acquired through years of deception. For a heartbeat, Lily couldn't breathe. The man she once loved, the man she once trusted with her future, had re-emerged not as a friend, not as family, but as a myth come to life. Their eyes met. She didn't wait for an introduction. She stormed toward him, Amanda close behind, and without hesitation, struck her hand hard across his cheek. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Guests turned. Conversations halted. The music died. You lied to me, Lily hissed, her voice tight with fury and disbelief. You lied to everyone. Kane touched his face lightly, then looked at her with something that might have been regret or amusement. I didn't lie, he said softly. I became who I was meant to be. No, Lily snapped. You hid. You manipulated. You made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting anything. All this time, you were watching, pulling strings like some twisted puppet master, and for what? Power? Revenge? Validation? Kane stepped closer. For freedom. Freedom? Lily's laugh was bitter. You don't know what freedom is. You abandoned your family. You destroyed trust. And then you built this empire of shadows to what? Prove a point? I built Dumas to escape the prison of expectation, Kane replied. Everyone had decided who I was. The screw-up. The cheater. The mistake. So I disappeared. I reinvented myself. I created a name people respected. I didn't do this to hurt you, Lily. But you did, she whispered, eyes glassy. You hurt me every day you let me believe you were gone. That you were just another chapter in a long book of mistakes I had to bury. Amanda gently touched Lily's shoulder, but Lily brushed it off. She wasn't finished. You invited us here for what? A show? A confession? Or did you just want to see how far you could push me before I broke? Kane sighed. I invited you because I wanted you to see me, not the man you buried, not the memory, but the truth. And I wanted to offer you a place in it. Lily's voice went quiet. A place? You think I want a place in this? He nodded. You were always the strongest person I knew. You made me better. Even now, I remember what we had. And I wanted to share this with you, in case there was still something left. There was a pause. A heartbeat of silence. And then Lily looked at him. Not as a mystery, not as a myth, but as the man who had once made her believe in forever, only to vanish into myth when forever became inconvenient. There's nothing left, she said simply. Only the ashes of a lie. She turned away, walking into the night, the sea breeze carrying away her tears before they could fall. Behind her, Kane remained frozen, the applause of his carefully orchestrated reveal long forgotten. Because in the end, no empire, no matter how powerful, could replace the soul he had once lost. And Lily, now fully awakened to the truth, vowed she would never again let shadows shape her reality. She would return to Genoa City not as the woman wronged, but as the woman reborn. And this time, the name Dumas would not shake her. It would drive her. Because the man behind the myth had once been hers. And now, she would make sure he never held that kind of power over her again. The evening air at the Dumas estate in Nice trembled with anticipation. An electric charge that seemed to vibrate through every polished marble corridor and shimmering terrace. Guests had begun to arrive hours earlier, each bearing a silent question in their eyes: who was Aristotle Dumas, and what would his grand revelation be? Candles flickered in ornate lanterns along the winding paths, casting dancing shadows on manicured hedges, while a soft orchestra played near a fountain whose waters glistened like liquid moonlight. The ocean breeze carried with it the faint tang of salt and the promise of something monumental. And among the distinguished crowd, Lily Winters moved like a storm contained within a teacup, determined, hurt, furious, and yet composed enough to mask the tempest roiling beneath her calm exterior. She had come not to celebrate but to confront, to lay bare the man she once loved, the man who had shattered her world by adopting this mythic identity and weaponizing it against all who had ever mattered to him. Tonight, beneath the arcaded colonnade and the sky littered with stars, the myth would end. It would end with the slap of history echoing through the halls and leaving a mark no curated persona could cover. Kane Ashby, introduced to the world earlier that evening as Aristotle Dumas, descended the central staircase into the grand courtyard, flanked by models draped in silken robes who held platters of champagne on silver trays. His appearance was as calculated as it was cinematic, a tailored navy suit, the lapels cut to catch the edge of the golden light, his hair meticulously styled yet somehow retaining that decade-old charm that had first drawn Lily to him. The hush that followed him as he stepped onto the marble dais felt unprecedented. Even seasoned socialites exchanged startled glances, uncertain whether they were witnessing the culmination of a legend or something far more sinister. And then there was Lily, standing a few feet from the bottom of the staircase, her breath steady but her gaze unyielding. She wore a gown of midnight blue that mirrored the twilight sky, the fabric clinging to her curves yet allowing her the movement of a panther, graceful but lethal. Her dark hair was pulled back in a knot that lent her a queenly air, yet there was no royalty in her eyes tonight, only a raw, incandescent truth. As the crowd slowly settled, horsehair violins slowed to a hush, and the first spotlight found Kane at the foot of the stairs. He raised a hand, half in salute, half in question, and for a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, his voice emerged, smooth and commanding, carrying across the courtyard like silk unfurling in the wind. Welcome, my friends, to the realization of a dream. For years, you have heard whispers of Aristotle Dumas, the phantom of finance and power who moves unseen behind every boardroom, every courtroom, every rumor that shakes the foundations of even the mightiest empires. Tonight, that phantom is no longer a myth. Tonight, you see me in the flesh. There was applause, tentative at first, then swelling with curiosity. And Kane, the conjurer of illusions, allowed himself a small, enigmatic smile before turning to begin his descent, each step measured, as though the marble itself were part of his stage. But Lily remained rooted, her gaze fixed on him with a magnetism that drew quiet gasps from those around her. For they all understood, in that instant, that this party was more than a social triumph, it was a battleground, and Lily was the challenger. When Kane reached the bottom, he extended a single hand as if to invite applause, and the crowd responded with polite cheers, but before he could continue, Lily advanced, her skirts swishing over the stone tiles. Guests parted like the Red Sea, forming a wide berth that seemed to funnel time itself toward her. In her presence, whispers died, and the last notes of the orchestra were swallowed by tension. Kane's eyes flicked to Lily, registering surprise and a flicker of something else. Regret, perhaps, or recognition of what was about to come. As the world paused, Lily launched forward, her voice ringing clear, "You hide behind a name, a mask, a persona. But tonight, we all see you for who you truly are." The hush deepened. What would follow? Would she merely rebuke him, confront him with words? No. In that breathless moment, she drew back her hand and struck Kane across the face with a sound that echoed like thunder through the courtyard. The crack of her palm against his cheek resonated in every ribcage, and for a moment, even the sea seemed to hold its breath. Kane staggered, his head snapping to the side, his eyes wide, as the brilliance of the torchlight captured the red imprint blooming across his skin, an indelible mark of betrayal. For Lily, that slap was not just retribution, it was an act of reclamation. It marked the moment she refused to be silenced, refused to be another casualty of his deceit. And as Kane's jaw clenched beneath the sting, Lily's gaze found his, and the fury in her eyes spoke 1,000 truths. You can no longer hide. The guests, politicians, CEOs, socialites, stood frozen, mouths agape, as Lily released Kane and took a step back. The subtle control that had governed the party evaporated into the night air. There was a collective intake of breath, a ripple of shock that roared through the assembled throng. Many had expected a theatrical unveiling, perhaps a witty proclamation that would dazzle. But none had been prepared for Lily's audacious blow, a blow that spoke louder than any speech. And as the slap's reverberations subsided, voices erupted, some gasped in disbelief, others murmured approval under their breath, while a few looked away, unwilling to witness the unraveling of the grand illusion. But Lily did not flinch as Kane touched his reddened cheek, nor did she look away when murmurs grew into whispers. Instead, she remained resolute, as if anchored by the righteousness of her act. For her, This moment was not about spectacle, it was about shattering the gilded cage Kane had constructed, about making everyone present confront the reality that the phantom they had worshipped was nothing more than a man, and a man who had betrayed the lives around him. Kane swallowed, composed himself, and for a moment, his face swam between anger and self-awareness. He raised a hand to his cheek as if the sting still lingered, then turned slightly to face the audience, trying to reclaim some measure of dignity. "Mrs. Winters," he began, his voice low, resonant, carefully modulated to convey both apology and pride. "Your outrage is justified." But the softness in his tone was met with a chorus of gasps. Kane was supposed to be remote, untouchable, even untarnishable by regret. Now he was human, too human. And that vulnerability only magnified the spectacle. "I became Aristotle Dumas to escape what had become a gilded prison, my identity, my failures, my perceived weaknesses. I wanted freedom to build something that was mine alone." But the applause that had begun to swell felt dissonant, some clapped in homage to his bravado, others in deference to Lily's audacity. The party had fractured into factions, those who viewed Kane as a misunderstood genius, and those who saw Lily's slap as a rightful reckoning. Before Kane could continue, Lily's voice cut through the murmur, a blade of steel disguised as silk. "Your freedom came at everyone else's expense," she declared. "You stole my trust. You used my love, and the love of others, like a weapon. You lived a lie that has caused irreparable damage." Her words battered the illusion Kane had built. Guests shifted uncomfortably as reality sank in. All the alliances, all the rumors whispered in high-powered offices, had been orchestrated by a man who had broken the heart of the woman standing before him. And that truth, more powerful than any manifesto, exposed the rotten core of Dumas's empire. As Lily spoke, Amanda Sinclair, a former confidant of Lily's and a woman of calm reason, stepped forward, her tone measured but firm. "Kane," she said, "you cannot absolve your betrayals with rhetoric. Your actions have ramifications here, in Genoa City, and tonight, they reach all the way to this estate in Nice." She glanced at the assembly. "For every board you've shaken, for every rumor you've ignited, there is a life ruined. And some of us are here to see justice served." The cameras that had been rolling to capture Dumas's grand reveal now pivoted toward Lily and Amanda, broadcasting live images of a confrontation that transcended any carefully crafted narrative. Even those watching from afar felt the electric charge, a sense that a legend was crumbling in real time. Kane's jaw hardened, but he did not flinch under Amanda's accusation. Instead, he turned back to Lily with a gaze that flickered between regret and defiance. "I did what I had to do," he said, voice wavering just enough to betray the fragments of a broken heart. "I saved myself from becoming nothing, another footnote in a family history I never fit into." Lily blinked, blinking back tears of frustration and lingering love. "But you didn't just save yourself," she retorted. "You saved your pride. You punished those who cared for you. You played God with everyone's future." The hush that followed was deafening. Even the orchestra, sensing the irreversible shift, fell silent. That's when Billy Flynn, portraying Kane Ashby in this sensational ruse, stepped forward from the crowd, the flicker of recognition passing between him and Lily. He had known the role he was to play, to be the face of Dumas's mythic persona. But he had also known that seeing Lily's betrayal laid bare in the courtyard would be the ultimate test of the character he inhabited. He adjusted his tie, forced a confident smile, and spoke up. "We never intended to harm you, Lily. This was always a game, a test of wills." The crowd exhaled, realizing that Billy Flynn was as much an actor in this drama as Kane himself. But the line between role and reality had blurred so thoroughly that many could no longer tell the difference. Some nodded, some frowned, others simply stood in mute astonishment. Meanwhile, a group of high-profile guests, including Devon Hamilton, Jill Abbott, and Amanda Sinclair, formed a semicircle around Lily and Kane, each ready to press their own questions. Jill crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "Why, Kane? Why build such an elaborate facade? We've all suffered because of Dumas, some in business, some in reputation. I lost entire subsidiaries of my company because of your machinations. Devon, his own experiences with Elliot Spencer still raw, stepped forward. You bankrupted livelihoods, Kane. How could you look us all in the eye tonight after everything you've done? Lily, channeling all the betrayal she had felt, turned to face the crowd, her gaze unwavering. Ask him yourself. She gestured to Kane. I've had my say. As the questions rained down, Kane stood at the epicenter, absorbing the storm. He might have offered defense. Pointed to the chaos of his childhood, his desperate need to reinvent himself, the betrayals he had endured at the hands of others. But the moment Lily had struck him, the power had shifted irrevocably. His words, at once smooth and brittle, attempted to explain, I built Dumas because in that name, I was free from judgment, free from expectation. Every move I made was to secure a future where I would never be at the mercy of others. Yes, lives were impacted, and for that, I regret the pain. But I don't regret becoming him. The crowd parted again as the music swelled, an orchestra of tension, the very notes seemingly underscoring that the lie had been laid bare, that the man once hidden behind decades of half-truths was now standing broken, vulnerable, and exposed. Lily spoke again, but this time her voice had softened just enough to betray the depth of her wounded heart. You weren't free, Kane. You were imprisoned by your own ego. You enslaved everyone around you in your need to prove something you could have proven with your two hands, your own mind, not by hiding behind a name. The guests had closed in, the glowing lanterns above them forming halos that lent the scene an almost biblical reverence. It was as if the final judgment was unfolding in real time, each word Lily spoke dripping with the agony of abandonment and betrayal.